This week, Theresa Lanowitz from AT&T Cybersecurity and Mani Kirti Nagotu from Sentinel-1 are with us to discuss the intersection of edge computing and endpoint. Then we're going to walk through a post-mortem of the latest Okta breach to better understand what happened and what we can learn from it. Finally, in the enterprise security news, lots of new security startups with early stage funding. Sentinel-1 picks up Chris Krebs and Alex Stamos' consulting firm. A PE firm picks up ActiveState, a company I haven't thought about since I last downloaded ActiveState Perl 1,000 years ago. Microsoft announces the limited release of Security Copilot. SemGrep releases a secret scanner. AGI predicted to come much sooner than you might expect. New York State doubles down on cybersecurity regulations to protect its hospitals. The young hackers behind Mirai, one of the biggest botnets ever. Ransomware groups snitch on businesses to the SEC. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. All right, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy International Check Your Wipers Day. This is episode 340, recorded on Thursday, November 16th, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today is the Czar of Zero Trust, the captain of content, Katie Teitler. How are you, Katie?
I am fine. On this perfectly sunny blue sky day. I guess it's a good day to check my wipers.
It was a better day for check your windows for me because I only use this PC for podcasting. And the reason we're running a little bit late today is Windows wanted to update. And the moment it said reboot to update your computer was right the moment when we were going to go live. And I clicked yes. And so I installed some patches.
That moment of sheer panic when you click something you know you shouldn't have. But it's okay. Everybody's willing to wait for you, Adrian.
You want to take it back like milliseconds after. I wanted to take it back, but you don't get a second chance at that. Windows, the moment you click reboot, Microsoft is like, yes. And
at least it wasn't, do you want to wipe your computer? That would have been so much worse.
That's pretty evil if that's a dialog box it's going to pop up that I could just click. Yeah.
I mean, it could.
It sounds like malware. Yeah, that would be awful. I would not do well in that situation. I'd have a really clean computer though. I'd be rebuilding it all the time. My computer performance would be great. All right, quick announcement here. You can join our Discord channel to chat with our hosts, ask questions, customize live stream alerts, and more. Visit securityweekly.com/Discord to receive an invite. And we do monitor that during the show. So if you ask questions there, I will see it. I've got it right on one of my other monitors here. All right. And this interview today is sponsored by AT&T Cybersecurity. Today's topic is exploring the intersection of security for edge computing and endpoint. We're excited to have two great guests with us today. The first is Theresa Lanowitz, head of Cybersecurity Evangelism for AT&T Cybersecurity. Welcome, Theresa.
Hi, Adrian. Thanks so much for having me on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have you back. We have some great conversations on here.
Yeah, I always enjoy talking to you on these podcasts. This is great. And I always like your little facts at the beginning. International Check Your Wipers Day. And I just had my car serviced, and I'm going to go make sure they check my wipers.
There you go. Yeah, it's one of those things that if you don't check it, one of those things you defer that you really regret when you need it, because not being able to see where you're going or not having any wiper fluid, you might as well check that. Along with the wipers, because
good tip. I live in the Pacific. Yeah, I live in the Pacific Northwest, so I'm checking my wipers fairly frequently. But good to have a reminder for the rest of the country.
Yeah, you need them more than most, right?
Yeah.
All right, and the second guest we have today is Mani Kirti Nagotu, the field CISO for Sentinel-1. Welcome, Mani.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be part of this podcast along with Theresa today.
And we had a Sentinel-1 announcement today that we're going to talk about in the news segment. That was an interesting acqui-hire, Alex Stamos and Chris Krebs. Really interesting.
Yes, as part of our OneCon customer conference last week, we launched Pinnacle One at OneCon. It is a strategic risk analysis and advisory group.
All right. So again, we are supporting that excellent Cybersecurity Insights report that AT&T Cybersecurity put out. And just laying the foundation here again, Theresa, if you can give us a good understanding, good explanation of what edge computing is and what it means, and maybe we can go to Mani for where it touches endpoint, how endpoint comes into that.
Sure, yeah, and endpoints are certainly a big part of edge computing, especially the more diversification we see in endpoints, the more prevalent edge computing is becoming. But for the purposes of the report that you mentioned, the AT&T Cybersecurity Insights report, the way we looked at edge computing, because edge computing is one of those words, one of those definitions that seems to be in flux. And if you ask 10 different people, you get 12 different answers. And the answers typically tend to lean to a tech stack that somebody might be working with inside their organization, or a tech stack that a company might be selling out to its clients. So we said, for the purposes of this report and what we want to talk about with edge computing, we have three common characteristics. The first characteristic is that it is software defined, and that can be on-prem or in the cloud. The second characteristic is that your workloads, your hosting, your applications, it's closer to where the data is being generated and consumed. Because if you look at what edge computing is doing, it's really all about that data. And then the third characteristic is that you have a distributed model of management, intelligence, and networks. And I think that when you look at these characteristics together, you suddenly start to realize that computing is really changing. I mean, it's changing right in front of us. We have experiences that are now digital first experience that are data driven. They're not tied to an app that we have to open on our phone or on our tablet or on our desktop somewhere. It is near real time information being served up to us in a digital fashion. And that is what the new edge experience is all about, is that data to be able to make a business decision, to be able to make a personal decision, is being served up to you in that digital first way in a near real time fashion.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, we don't think about, we think about a hospital having an MRI, but we don't think about the Windows XP machine connected to it that allows it to function. And
don't forget about a Windows XP machine, right?
I'm throwing that out there on the off chance that somebody listening is like, yep, you got it.
I used to live in downtown Portland, Oregon, and it was, to me, one of the I don't know, kind of, it was just a nerdy little fun thing to do after hours, after all the businesses were closed, especially the banks. Walk by businesses after hours and just look on the desks and on the counters and see what operating system people were running on their computers. And to me, it was really, really kind of interesting to see that banks were running Windows 7 for a long, long time. And so you kind of look at that and you say, wow, there's some big gaping holes out there. It was long after Microsoft had stopped supporting Windows 7 from a security update point of view. So, if you live in an urban area, it's kind of a fun little, kind of just a little scavenger hunt, little hike to do after hours.
Well, Microsoft did accept money to continue giving support to some people, and guess who paid them that money so that they could continue using Windows 7 a couple years after everybody else wasn't getting support anymore?
Who was that?
Banks.
Banks. Yeah.
Yeah, the banks are looking. Yeah. I guarantee you that's Microsoft.
That's where I was seeing most of the Windows 7 long after the security update had expired.
Yeah. And Mani, how do you see the connection between, from your perspective, I've had trouble keeping up with Sentinel-1. It's been growing so quickly. I know Sentinel-1 is a lot more than just EDR and next-gen AV and endpoint at this point. But from your perspective, how do you see the connection between endpoint and edge computing?
Yeah, so in general, like I can talk from a cybersecurity perspective. And if you look at the objectives of cybersecurity for organizations, it is to identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover from cyber events. And the first step is to gain visibility of what is happening in your environment, identifying threats and mitigating them timely. So understanding how your endpoints, cloud, and identities are being secured and managed. And coming to threat landscape in the recent times, ransomware is the most talked about in the market, and we have seen many organizations being compromised by ransomware. So our patented rollback technology basically supports system recovery and reconstitution efforts. So let's say if there's an attack that changes the files on an endpoint, such as ransomware, rollback restores the shadow copy files impacted by the threat. And that's how you basically secure your endpoint. And coming to our patented storyline technology as well, it provides analysts with real-time actionable correlation and context. Because in an organization, you have different endpoints, you have cloud, you have identity to manage. So automatically linking, enriching, and visualizing all the events in case of a ransomware attack.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for that.
The ransomware side is really interesting because we're now starting to see this whole double extortion ransomware again, where you're hit with ransomware, and then if you do not comply with the demands of the cyber adversary, they'll come in, they'll hit you with a DDoS attack. So this whole double extortion, these ransomware gangs, I mean, they're out there and they're really quite active.
Yeah. Yeah, and something else I wanted to talk about today, it's interesting. We see a lot of trends with products. We see trends where, everybody's really focused on the endpoint because the adversaries are focused on the endpoint, and then we see, a trend where maybe we're more focused on the identity because, I don't necessarily need the endpoint if I can get into your Microsoft 365 account or your Google Workspace account. I don't even have to touch the endpoint because that's going to be connected to everything else if I can get that account. And then we also see trends on the budgeting side as well. We definitely see these kinds of ebbs and flows where people are, like when Next Gen AV came out, lots of point solutions. Sentinel-1 was one of those. Kind of one-trick ponies had one product that they were built around until they had a chance to grow as a company, and now they've become they displaced a lot of the existing platforms. We saw the Symantec's, the McAfee's, and now became that platform. And again, we're, Mani, this is kind of directed towards you. It seems like we're seeing this budgeting trend again away from point products and more to consolidation, getting rid of stuff that isn't clearly producing value, or at least moving to things, to products and platforms that can do more than one thing for you.
That's right. So I think before joining Sentinel-1, I've worked as a security practitioner. And as part of my role, I have experienced myself and seen the challenges which are experienced by the security operations teams, right? So some of the challenges they, as security practitioner experiences, is mean time to detect and respond. And as we have seen in most attacks, it's the mean time to detect and respond that makes a company or breaks a company. So enabling that for SOC teams with this capability and looking holistically across your cloud, your endpoint, your identity, as well as approaching cybersecurity from people, process, technology perspectives and building those defenses is a key area as a security leader has to focus on, and also improving the scale and performance. So as company marches towards increasing their employee size, the tool should enable the teams to scale up. So have automation built in. And we do not want security teams to scratch their heads to figure out how is the tool going to work if we increase the employee size. And most importantly, increase the security operations efficiency as well as the skill set. So one of the challenges that cybersecurity industry faces is skill shortage. And the tool should be helping the security practitioners to use it efficiently. And as you have rightly said, we have started off as an EDR company, but now we are into cloud identity, and we have our XDR platform, which is basically based on our Singularity Data Lake. And the platform is built on Singularity Data Lake, a central and a unified solution for security and IT analytics, streamlining ingestion, normalization, and visualization for rapid queries, retention, and processing. So that kind of gives like holistic picture for security teams to perform or carry out any actions related to incident response.
And I think this whole movement to platforms, it's the natural evolution of the market. But also, if you look at a SOC, so a lot of people are probably working with managed security service providers for their SOC, their security operations center. So to have a SOC be able to use that platform to be able to say, we have this unified vision of what's going on, that's really powerful as well. And I think a couple of years ago, we would hear the comments all of the time is that, oh, there are so many cybersecurity tools out there. We don't know what to do. We get so many false positives. And now we start to see them being integrated into more of a platform that Mani just spoke about.
Right. I think I can also add something. When we specifically look at security operations, I have to mention about our Purple AI. Security teams have to go through long alert queues and spend a lot of time on investigations. So on top of that, we also have the security skill shortage in the industry. So this results in SOC team burnout and also little time for proactive threat hunting. So Purple AI is a force multiplier that saves time and resources for security teams by scaling autonomous protection across the enterprise. So basically simplifying the complexity by using natural language, and an analyst is empowered with any instructional hunting prompts, AI-powered auto summaries, suggested queries, and next actionable steps.
And Theresa, I wonder what your insights report tells us about endpoint. You know, I recall from going through it, seems like endpoint is right up there near the top and for almost every vertical. You know, like I mentioned before, all these things we think of as being IoT devices are actually endpoints themselves or have endpoints connected to them somehow by necessity.
Yeah, the endpoints are increasingly important, especially as we start to move to the edge. And one of the things we found is that 48% of our survey participants, and this was a global survey of 1,418 people, 48% of them said, we're using the usual suspects for our endpoints: laptops, desktops, phones, tablets. But 30% of them said, we're using these sort of new and innovative and very diverse endpoints. Think robots, wearables for a healthcare, remote patient monitoring type of situation, autonomous drones, autonomous vehicles. And so that was really interesting. And then when we went back and we looked at it and we broke it out by 7 different vertical categories: healthcare, finance, retail, manufacturing, energy and utilities, transportation, and U.S. state, local, and higher education. We identified the top endpoint from each of those 7 verticals. And manufacturing, their top endpoint is a robot, which is really, really different. So we start to see these different types of endpoints emerge. In retail, their top endpoint was the good old-fashioned PC. So there's, a big kind of spectrum there in terms of what these endpoints are. And securing those diversified endpoints is really important. What we're also starting to see, and we started to see this kind of in the middle of this year, we're starting to see these intentional or purpose-built endpoints where instead of saying, oh, I'm going to take the entire operating system that I might have in something like a smartwatch, and I'm going to put it in a very intentional endpoint, a watch, that if I'm a healthcare organization, I might be able to use it for remote patient monitoring. And all it's doing is sending back the vital signs back to the doctor's office that doctor wants to monitor for a patient. So it's not cumbersome. It's not overloaded with a bunch of other apps on there. It's easy for the patient to use from a form factor. And again, so what they're saying is, it's not sort of the traditional off-the-shelf type of endpoint. So we're starting to see this real diversification of endpoints as well, which gets really interesting very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's interesting how we're now seeing like even healthcare devices are consumer devices, basically. Like in the past, you might get this, they might prescribe you like a chest strap to monitor your heart rate with some brick that has Windows CE installed on it, and it's, the hospital buys it for $2,000 or something like that, as a purpose-built medical device. And now an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, can do a lot of basically what they need, which I think is both more convenient, more cost effective, and I think for a lot of people, just being able to track your own health is kind of a nice convenience. Not having to go to the doctor to just figure out, what your blood oxygenation is, for example, or detecting issues with your heart, murmurs and things like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that when you see the updates to some of these really popular products, when they come out with updates in the general market, it is specifically aligned to, this is our operating system that is, this update is focused on health. And of course, you have to have the supporting hardware for it. But, it's pretty nice. The other might be sort of monitoring you as you're out exercising, for example, and notifying you or notifying somebody who might be concerned about you that, oh, this person was in a bicycle accident, for example, if they're out riding bicycles. So I'm a big bicyclist, so every example I use from a sports perspective always comes back to bicycles. But I think the way the manufacturers are creating these endpoints is really unique and really interesting, with multiple points of use as well.
And it occurs to me we've already mentioned robots. We're also going to mention AI, and we've already mentioned malicious actors all in the same conversation. And that makes me a little nervous.
Why? Because you think the malicious actors can attack the endpoints?
Well, robots if robots are on the edge, they're accessible, right? Yeah.
One of the big use cases we saw for robots was healthcare organizations using robots to disinfect an exam room or disinfect a hospital room after a patient leaves. That was a pretty cool use case. Also delivering supplies to a nurse's station, for example. That robot can go from point A to point B very effectively. And one of the ones I really, really liked is that inside of hospitals, and we've all been there, you go in a hospital and you're looking for a certain department, and the person says, oh, take the blue line to the red line to the green line, and you'll arrive there. And pretty soon you're lost in the bowels of the hospital somewhere. They were using robots to help with directions inside of a hospital. So I think that was a really, really nice, unique use case that people really, really want. And I think with a lot of these use cases, you have to look at them and say, are the consumers of this use case, do they really want that? Do they really need that? And I think that what we're seeing with so much of edge computing is that the silos, I think, inside of IT organizations are being broken down. So there's starting to be more of a common conversation about what the edge computing use case, what business problem it's going to solve. So that's really nice, because people are thinking about how the technology is going to be used, not just let's just put the technology out there.
I mean, I did mention about Purple AI a little earlier about how we are using generative AI to help for threat hunting, response, and analysis. But I can also give you an example. SentinelOne also offers behavioral detection. So instead of trying to identify malware that have been masked using several techniques, it looks at what it's actually doing. So is the program creating new executables without authorization, or is it disabling key Windows features, or otherwise taking actions to disturb the integrity of a computer or a server? So then it is malware, and SentinelOne will chart this history of the suspect program and help security analysts with understanding its attack path and reverse its changes at any point.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. Every time I do a lot of postmortems on breaches, and I dig and I find the details. In fact, that's the segment we're doing right after this. Is we're going through a breach postmortem. And I see these cases where, sometimes endpoint security products miss detecting the actual malware. But then you see what the malware did, and you're like, you don't really have to detect the malware when it's like shady behavior, all as a sub-process of Microsoft Word or something like that. Like that. That's a pretty clear, if you're looking at the behaviors, most of the time, the attackers have to achieve the same goals, right? Regardless of what piece of malware they use to do it. They're dumping creds from memory. They're creating new admin accounts. They're shutting down security services, so that they can work unhindered, stuff like that, right?
That's right. Yeah. And as a security practitioner, like looking at David Bianco's pyramid of pain, right? Like at what level the adversaries are operating at, the TTPs that need to look at, and how your defenses are built against it. And as you said, like their behavioral piece plays a very critical part there.
So, Mani, again from you, what are you seeing in terms of tool consolidation here? I think one of the things we've seen change the most over the years is the SIM. So you talked about SentinelOne's Singularity Data Lake, and it's not. I've been out of the enterprise side for a while, so it's not entirely clear to me if that's like a one-to-one replacement for a SIM, or if XDR is also helping to replace some of these SIM use cases, because one of the old use cases was kind of a detect and respond, correlate your logs to make it easier to discover threats, threat hunting, that kind of thing. So help me understand what the current state of consolidation in terms of detecting and responding things. I know that's only one of the use cases for a SIM. There's also kind of like a forensics audit use case there as well. But what are you seeing there?
Yeah, I think I'll talk about Singularity Data Lake to get a bit more clearer in terms of like what our Singularity Data Lake does. So it basically is essential and a unified solution for security and IT analytics, for ingestion as well as visualization of queries. So this consolidated AI-powered security and log data platform brings together SIEM, which is Security Information and Event Management, and extended detection response and log analytics solutions. So it's basically the layer which can help security operations team to get data from all the areas that they can gather for a particular incident and help in the incident investigation. So by streamlining cybersecurity and IT operations, it reduces the complexity and also enhance the effectiveness in managing the security. So let's say there is an incident and you want to understand how the attacker made entry into the environment. What was the lateral movement? And it's not that you would operate in a silo, right? You have an endpoint, you're connected to the cloud, you have an identity to manage. So creating that correlation between all the activities that happen in an incident and having that data platform, which can bring together SIEM and XDR, can tremendously improve security operations activities and their efficiency, as well as address skill shortage.
And how do you address the issue of data overload and alert fatigue? Because we have all of these advanced tools now, and we're talking about edge computing, right? And more endpoints, more and more data, and these tools are all working together and they're great, but that creates more data and a prioritization problem if people don't know how to handle it.
Yes, that's one of the things that we're trying to help through Purple AI, because we're believing in human and machine teaming, right? Humans cannot go through like petabytes of data, and data is being generated every day in huge amounts across organizations. So in this matter, we are trying to use the machines, which is our Purple AI, going through like the petabytes of data, going to that long alert queues. Let's say an organization does not have the time and the resources to do a backlog of threat hunting queries that they want to do. So Purple AI comes into picture and helps the SOC teams with it. So our intention is to like go to that petabytes of data, create like alert summaries, and which will help the security teams to make decisions and what are the next actions that I can do from this data. That's how we are saving the time as well as the expertise that is needed for security operations and the investigations.
That's great. Now the next question is, so you're helping SOC team members with, finding the right data, finding the needle in the haystack, so to speak. But what are some of the top things, if you've got a SOC team who is dealing, even if you're a mid-sized company, there are potentially a lot of attacks and attack vectors. Even if you have a prioritization list, it's hard to prioritize because you're going to have different departments who are going to have different priorities. You're going to have executives who have different priorities. How do you advise SOC teams to either rationalize those priorities or to communicate to come to a consensus? Because we know that security is there to feed the business. We know that the main goal is to eliminate as much friction as possible from the business, which means keeping it safe. But how do you advise SOC practitioners, or how have you seen some of your customers manage that push-pull, especially when you've got so many different things happening inside the SOC that might be different priorities for different business units?
Right. And in my own experience, as well as I speak to security leaders, approaching cybersecurity from a people process technology perspective, understanding which processes can be automated, understanding how the tools are going to help the security operations team, because you do not want your security operations team to spend a lot of time to just understand the tool. So whatever the tool that they're using, it has to be easy to learn. It has to be easy to work with the reports within. So understanding those parts as a security practitioner, as a security leader, that's how you bring in value, where the process can be automated, where let's say you have policies, procedures, where can then be improved, which technologies fit in my environment, how do they help my security teams, and also bringing awareness within the employees and the organization, because that is key as well. Educating employees on the latest threats that the organization is facing, having that phishing training built in. And that's how you approach security holistically. And with regards to specifically talking about prioritization and how do you move across, every event is not an incident. So understanding your incident response plan, what are the steps in incident response? It's very key for a security operations team. So on what basis are you prioritizing? Is it informational impact? Is it recoverability impact? Is it business impact? So building that as basis can help you drive in the right direction for your security team.
And sort of moving beyond that, and Theresa, this is a question for you as well. What do you think is the next frontier? Because cybersecurity is always changing and it's predicated on the devices that we build. And we were just talking about robots cleaning operating rooms or emergency rooms. What's the next frontier? What are some of the things that, obviously it's going to be sector specific to a certain degree, but what are we looking at, 5-10 years from now? It's a long time, but 15 years from now, we couldn't have imagined that we could get to this state. It was something for sci-fi movies, right? But it's here. It's definitely here.
Yeah, it's here and it's coming faster. And I'll tell you, I really, really like the comment that Mani made about that cybersecurity is it's a joint venture, if you will, between humans and machines, because there's so much information coming out. There's no way that a human can parse all that information and understand what to do with it. But then bringing in the human aspect of it with people who are, incredibly well trained. I think we're going to start to certainly see future states be more focused on data. So data security, so data at rest, in transit, in use. How's that data secure? What are you doing with that data? My big thing is application security. I've been a big advocate of application security since 2002. And here we are 21 years later, and application security is still kind of considered the frontier. So I think application security is still going to be a big, big factor. I think this idea of multi-factor authentication really starts to bring in something beyond biometrics. So it's this idea of saying, let's really prove that it's you. Let's prove that you are fit to do the task that you are about to do, whether it is fly a plane, drive a bus, operate on somebody. So it's this idea of verifying that, yes, it's really you, but are you really fit to do this task? And I think that's something that we'll probably see. You said, Katie, 15 years from now, probably in the future, that's something that's going to be out there. So these endpoints are going to continue to evolve. Endpoints are going to continue to be really, really critical and important in what we're doing. And the applications, as I said, the application security has to come about, but the applications themselves are changing. They're applets, if you will, and they're machine-to-machine communication. And that is really the last mile and securing that last mile. So making sure those applets are secured, making sure that they're cohesive in what they're doing, and the information that is being generated by those devices and given to a consumer is really something that can be trusted and usable, but it also has to be protected as well. So I think that's kind of where we're going in the future, and the endpoints are just going to continue to diversify, which is pretty exciting.
And what does it mean? Because so many of these devices, it's funny because if you go back, 15 or so years, you talk about consumerization coming into the workplace, and now the workplace is going back to consumerization to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. But what does it mean for risk and responsibility? Because I really do see, especially how we work today, we all work at home at least some of the time. And we work from different places, right? I don't tend to leave my home office, but a lot of people, I know Adrian, for instance, will occasionally go to a coffee shop. We travel for work. I could go to my friend's house and work from there, or it creates a problem with baseline. So where do we start to see that balance of risk versus responsibility versus reporting?
Yeah, and I think those are really important conversations that are going to be had over the next 3, 4, 5, 10 plus years, because the workplace is changing, the workplace is shifting. Even the risk that you're taking on at a personal level with your own personal computing that you're using, that's changing as well. Your home is now maybe a smart home. So you have to be able to identify what that risk is. And I think this is really a great moment for cybersecurity, because what we've seen with the pandemic and the advent of the workplace really changing, we saw cybersecurity go from being a technical issue to now being a business requirement. And if you're not having those cybersecurity conversations at the business level, your business is probably going to suffer some repercussions that, cybersecurity is not included at that business level. So I think that's one thing. And then I think that what we're also going to see is we're going to see a lot of new roles, a lot of new professional roles come out that we have not seen before, because every generation of technology brings something to us that we didn't know we needed, or we didn't know that we were necessarily going to have this role. So, for example, when social media became the big thing, probably 10, 15 years ago inside corporations, who would have thought that we would now have inside large companies social media managers? And that is a very new role. So as we start to see things change, we'll see AI prompt engineers. I think the other nice thing that we're seeing with things such as generative AI coming into the marketplace is that organizations aren't fighting it. They're really embracing it. And I think that's a completely different mindset than what we had 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when social media started to become something in the marketplace or inside of the workplace, or when we started to see open source really kind of come into the workplace. So I think these newer technologies, things such as generative AI, it's really being embraced. And I think that that's really good. And so I think that organizations are going to be able to use that technology to their benefit. There's certainly going to be a lot more conversations around risk, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and especially inside of a larger organization.
All right.
Just to add on that, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mani.
Yeah, so we are also seeing a lot of organizations treating cyber risk as strategic. So earlier it was more to do with tactical or not taking any important role in the organization. So influencing the security culture within the organization. And on top of that, we are seeing a lot of cyber regulations coming into picture as well. So there is also an understanding of who is responsible, who's accountable for any kind of cyber incidents that happen within the organization. And from an AI perspective, as I said, like from a defense perspective, like we have our Purple AI and we have been using behavioral AI before as well. From the offense side, we're seeing even the adversaries using AI. So we have Sentinel-1 Labs has identified a new Python-based info stealer and a hack tool called Predator AI that is designed to target cloud services. And the Predator AI developer implemented a ChatGPT-driven class into Python script. That's one case, and we also heard about like Fraud GPT, Worm GPT coming up with their own use cases from the offensive side. So there would be a lot of changes in threat landscape as well as the risk landscape as we move forward.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I hadn't heard about that info stealer, which is definitely a trend that we've seen. Is instead of, I don't even have to steal your username and password, right? With an info stealer, I can just steal your OAuth key from your logged in session, and now I'm logged in as you. So yeah, we're seeing more and more of that. So one last question. I'm going to go to you, Mani, and then Theresa, if you want to take us home to wrap up this conversation. Just building on what we've been talking about, tech moves fast. Security startups are popping up all over the place. So security moves fast. Threats move fast. Just talking about that new type of info stealer. And CISOs have a million things to worry about. So how do they prioritize such that they're not always stuck in a reactive state, always firefighting? Curious to hear your opinions and your suggestions there, Mani.
Yeah, so for CISOs, I think as a security practitioner before, for CISOs, the main areas will differ based on the industry and the size of the organization they operate in. But from my perspective, it's the security program and the security operations. So understanding where your gaps are. So approaching cybersecurity from a people, process, technology perspective and gaining a clear understanding of your risks. Because I have seen that as a big gap from security practitioner role in translating those security risks to the senior management as well as the board so that they get enough buy-in for any security initiatives. So understanding the risk part of it and where you can improve your security operations, not trying to bring in new tools or increase false positives. Going into that details, just doing a review, a periodic review and understanding what can be improved within security operations, whether it's the process or whether using efficient tools and how you're addressing your risks for your organization is key. So prioritizing that for CISOs would help them in the coming future as well. And keeping updated on the latest threats as we are hearing a lot of AI-based business email compromise as well. So how are you improving your security awareness training program for your employees? Even that is key.
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's a combination of having that good team internally, so building out a good team around you that you can trust, that you can collaborate with, that you can communicate with, but also bringing in that third-party trusted advisor to really help you in these new areas, such as edge computing, to really help you in new areas such as how are you going to use generative AI inside of your organization? How do you assess the risk of using something like that? So one of the things we found in the AT&T Cybersecurity Insights report is that people told us as they move to the edge, it's really important to break down the silos inside of their IT organization. So making sure that development communicates with security, communicates with the line of business, with the infrastructure team, and so on. So breaking down those silos internally is a really positive thing, but also being able to bring in that trusted advisor, that third party, whether it is a consulting organization, to just say, hey, here's what's going on, and here's where your risks are, or here's where you're great, but here's what you should be looking forward to the future. So bringing in a consulting organization, working with a managed security service provider to really act as a strategic extension of your team. Bringing in somebody like a global systems integrator, a telco to help you in network selections and so on. So it's about building a team that you can trust, communicate, and collaborate with internally, as well as working with that trusted third-party advisor. And we see that organizations across the board, as they're starting down this path of edge computing especially, they're saying we're bringing in that trusted third-party advisor. So I think that's really key, is to have that external advisor that you work with, that you can bounce ideas off of. They can bring you new ideas. So, it's often said that cybersecurity is a team sport, and it certainly is, but it's also something that you have to be prepared for. And being prepared for cybersecurity means thinking about, yes, what's going on in your organization today, but also being prepared and looking ahead for tomorrow.
Excellent advice. Theresa and Manny, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. It was great to have you.
Thank you so much, Adrian.
Thank you so much.
All right, make sure you visit securityweekly.com/ATT Cybersecurity to learn more. And stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to go through a postmortem of the latest Okta breach.
We're investigating it. We can't tell you quite yet because we haven't gone through the whole process. But the initial, hey, denial, you have nothing to worry about, we're blaming this one person thing, it's just not a great response. And it doesn't really bode well. And I really wish, to your point, that companies would think about that more and think more about what it means, not just for their customer base, but for the future of security and for security to be taken seriously by the rest of the business, because we still occasionally have gaffes where security teams do something that doesn't quite align with the business. And then we see the problems of the business overriding security, either their requirements or their requests or whatever it may be. And it's because of things like this and the inability to communicate very clearly and honestly, even if it's, I don't know, or we can't tell you yet. That's a better response, I think.
Right. And it's So let me run through what happened. I don't want to get too much deeper into this without actually going through how the breach went down. So I'm gonna go through a quick summary of what happened here. So at some point, I'm not sure that they know the initial point when the attacker got in. I think it was they know enough to know they narrowed it down to a single employee, and a single employee had signed into their personal Google profile on Chrome on their work computer. But they were using a service account to log in. I'm not sure why they were using a service account to log in. One of the downsides of a service account is because it's a non-human account, you can't tie MFA to it. So this would have been just a username and password. And then they saved that username and password with Chrome, which if you have sync turned on in Chrome, it will not only save that username and password on that system, but to the cloud. So any system or, your phone, anything you log into with Chrome now will have that username and password saved in it. And so they think that's how the attackers got access to this support portal. To this customer support system. So I assume that service account had something to do with the customer support system. Instead, this is an identity and authentication company. This employee should have been logging in with their secure MFA-enabled work account, Okta account, not with this service account. So not sure why that was the case, but I think a lot of weird little edge cases like that happen all the time. You see it all over the place where a process isn't as secure as it should be, and people just trying to get stuff done will do insecure things like this. So pretty typical case. Shouldn't be a typical case for Okta, but that's how the attackers got in. And then the attackers, using the support website, and I assume they realized this before they broke into it, but one of the steps that Okta will have customers go through troubleshooting something is to upload a HAR file. And what a HAR file is, if you go to your web browser and you go to a website that you log into that has a login prompt, and then you right click and you click on inspect and you bring up the dev tools and you go to network and you hit record in the network segment, and then you log into that website, it's going to save all that data, including the credentials, any OAuth keys that you're issued are going to get saved inside that inspect session, that dev tools session. And then if you right click on any of those elements on the network tab, you'll be given an option to save it as a HAR file. So that will save all that data in a plain text file. So now your credentials, your OAuth key is saved as plain text in a file that ends in a .har extension on your computer. This is a very dangerous thing to do. But this is what support for Okta, and I'm sure 100 other companies out there, their support folks are doing the same thing. They're having people save these HAR files, upload them to the support site, and the attackers clearly knew this, or at least discovered it, and realized they could target Beyond Trust, they could target Cloudflare, they could target 1Password, because they all had Okta credentials saved in these plain text files sitting on this portal. Now, Okta, if you look at their documentation, their support documentation, they do advise you to scrub any credentials from these HAR files before uploading them. And I even went back in the web.archive.org, the Wayback Machine, and yes, those instructions were there before this breach happened. That wasn't something that they hastily added after the fact.
Right.
So they said the right thing, but so doing my own testing, I found it's not easy to sanitize these HAR files. Like, depending on the web application, the variable or the cookie that your OAuth keys or your credentials are stored in could have any name. And most of the HAR file sanitizer tools out there don't show you the data. Like, even the one that Cloudflare kind of threw together after this incident, I think they're trying to make a point here. Cloudflare was very snarky in its responses, somewhat deservedly, and I couldn't do it. So I used an application that I use all the time. It's a custom application that we use here at Security Weekly as my test, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't find the credentials in there without looking at the raw text file. So most of the people that are uploading this stuff, I don't think they have the skills necessary to be able to sanitize these files. So this is one of those cases where it's an easy lesson learned to say, you idiots, you should have just patched, or you should have just sanitized your HAR files. Like that's what you'll see a lot of people yelling on, well, it used to be Twitter, whatever social media we use now to yell at people.
Use that platform. Come on, I know it's off topic, but come on.
But yeah. So that was one of the first lessons I found, is that it's not easy to sanitize these files. We need better tools to sanitize them, or better training, or what have you. But
or both, yeah. It shouldn't be hard, that hard for somebody in a technical position with,
right,
a modicum amount of experience to do almost anything that basic, right? Because that's been the problem with security all along. It shouldn't be that hard, because if we make it that hard, people aren't going to do it. If there's that much friction, they're not going to do it.
Right. Well, and they're trying to fix something, right? So what do people do when they're trying to just get something working? They make really bad decisions. That's where people get administrative access to things and root access to things, because if you give somebody all the privileges, if you take that easy path, you'll get your problem solved really quickly, but you're also trading off a large amount of risk for that. So I don't think the onus should have been entirely on Okta's customers to sanitize these files either. I think Okta should have recognized, like it's on them to look at these files systematically and say, oh no one is sanitizing these files. We should probably do something about that, because we are currently storing plain text credentials to Cloudflare, to 1Password, to BeyondTrust, and 2 other customers we don't know the names of yet. Because they said 5 customers were had sessions hijacked, and only 3 of those are public that we know about. So this also should have been on them to say, we told them to sanitize it. They're not sanitizing it. So we got to do something to protect these files. And they should have realized this. They should have been encrypting those files, figured out a way to sanitize them themselves. But you can't just let customers upload plain text credentials and just leave them in plain text on this support portal. So that was a big miss on their part there.
Why do you think that happened in the first place? Because I agree with you. I mean, I'm sure it cost time and money. I'm sure there were resources that could have been allocated to that they would say, hey, we're focused on other things. But if you are, in effect, a security company, and I can see people who would say, well, it's not really security. I think it's a security company. They should have these processes there, versus saying, we're going to do something that we know has a high likelihood of prompting a security event. I don't want to say incident, I don't want to say breach, but we know that something like this, we've known for years, never store secrets in clear text. So why do you think a company like that with, with a good history and good reputation and enough money, why do you think that would happen?
I think it's a process failure, right? Like security architecture, threat mapping. Whoever's setting up this support site and is in charge of securing it, probably not somebody with a security background. Maybe it's somebody on the customer success side of the organization. It's just it's one of those gaps, one of those areas where maybe the CISO over at Okta didn't really think about it much, didn't really think that there could be anything that sensitive over there. It just didn't occur to anybody. They didn't do the architecture and the threat mapping work, or if they did, this was just a risk that they missed, that they overlooked. But yeah, at some level, yeah, I wonder if maybe somebody said something and they weren't listened to or something like that, because at some level, like these support folks have to realize, okay, I'm having them upload these things and it's not supposed to have secrets in it, and it's got secrets in it. Or maybe they just don't notice. Maybe it's just so transparent to everybody what's in these HAR files, and their process doesn't involve them actually seeing what's in it. Maybe. Or maybe they actually need those secrets in it to be able to do the troubleshooting. I don't know what a typical Okta troubleshooting session looks like that involves uploading HAR files. So I'm missing part of the picture here, so I can't really give a complete answer.
Yeah, of course. Some of this is speculation, and it's super easy, to throw peanuts from the cheap seats. So
yeah, very true. Very true. And keep that in mind as we dole out any criticism here. One piece of criticism I will dole out, though, is in the final update to their to the notice about this breach. They say a threat actor gained unauthorized access to files inside Okta's customer support system associated with 134 Okta customers, or less than 1% of Okta customers. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like I feel like this is not the opportunity to try and play down the issue here, especially when that 1% of Okta customers included 1Password and Cloudflare. I don't care if it affected 2 customers. Those are some concerning customers, that you're putting at risk here. So I don't think this was the right place to try and downplay it by saying it's only 1%. Like, I know they want to preserve customer confidence. They don't want people to start leaving their platform, but I think that had the opposite effect on me.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of who the customers were, big customers, reputable customers, thank goodness, customers with good security teams, right? But what if you're a little company who this severely affects, right? Yeah. You're not there thinking, okay, this wasn't a big deal because I'm not a household name, right? So if a company is paying you for your service, whether they're paying you $10 or $10 million, you don't just go, it was only these guys. It's not. It doesn't say a lot about how they, and maybe it was just a big gaffe on the communications team or whomever wrote that, but you don't downplay your customers ever. I can see trying to make your company sound great, but putting your customers in a light like, we don't, we're not taking this as seriously because it's only 2 customers. Well, it doesn't matter if you're a big customer or a small customer. If you suffer a breach because some other company had some sort of pass-through compromise, that's a big deal to you.
Yeah. And I know part of it, they're a public company. They got, general counsels telling them, okay, here's certain things you have to say. So, some of it probably comes from that. I think they're a public company. I think we had Tyler join us. Tyler, do you know if Okta is a public company?
We are. I am, and they are a publicly traded company. Sorry, I got feedback there for a split second. Yes, they're a publicly traded company. I believe the stock has not done so well recently, but I haven't checked in quite some time. But I have no idea what you guys are talking about other than asking that question.
Yeah, we're talking about their breach.
Oh,
the one that impacted 1Password and Cloudflare and BeyondTrust.
And then the victim blaming that came alongside it.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah. Let me run the rest of the way through this, and then we'll get to some of the lessons learned, because there's a lot of rabbit holes to dive down. So 1Password was the first to discover it, reported it to Okta. Okta said, we don't see anything wrong. So they started digging internally. Then on October 2nd, just a few days later, BeyondTrust got hit. Also, like 1Password, detected it really quickly and reported it to Okta, I think, the next day. And again, Okta still doesn't think this is an issue for them. So they told BeyondTrust, don't know what to tell you, but, we don't see anything wrong. And so BeyondTrust kept at it. They went back, looked at their systems, and kept on insisting, no, it must be something on your side. And eventually, in that back and forth with BeyondTrust, Okta did discover the issue. They put out a notice, that they did have an incident, and they started to work it as an incident. And while they're working it as an incident, the attackers hit Cloudflare on October 18th. So already more than 2 weeks after BeyondTrust got hit. So the attackers have been in here. I think the total exposure was September 28th through October 17th. And, so they eventually eject the attacker. And so I take that back. They hadn't announced it yet. It wasn't until after Cloudflare published about it that Okta finally publicly announced that, yes, this was us. It was an issue on our systems. So, yeah, that's one of the criticisms, is that I think it was a week and a half, something like 10 days between the point when they realized, yes, they did have a breach, and when they actually publicly announced it. So I think up until that point, 1Password was still ripping their own stuff apart, convinced that it must have been an issue on their side. So that was pretty rough for 1Password. But
Adrian?
Each of these, and it's linked in the blog post. 1Password, BeyondTrust, and Cloudflare all did their own write-ups, and those are all linked in there. You can read those.
Yeah, so I have a question though, because this is just my dumb reptilian brain here. Could it be that they just didn't understand it? Like, I know they get ripped and passing the buck and punting it off. Like, could it be it just didn't hit the right people, didn't have the right process, or they just didn't understand the flaw until it was too late?
Yeah, so they actually they reference this in their write-up. Okta does. They say, for a period of 14 days while actively investigating, Okta did not identify suspicious downloads in our logs. And what it was BeyondTrust gave them the IP address that the attacker had hit them with. And when they searched for that IP address, that's when Okta was able to find the malicious activity on their side.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just, I hate to jump on Okta too bad. Obviously, there were mistakes made in spots where they probably could have improved on their knowledge, improved their workflow, improved their speed. But sometimes you just don't know, and you just can't figure it out. You know what I mean? Sometimes that stuff just takes time.
Yeah, I think in the part that you missed earlier, the big takeaway for Okta was not realizing that they were asking customers to upload credentials and OAuth keys in plain text, and they were storing those in plain text on their support site. I think that's the biggest lesson, I think, to take away here, is that you have to do some really good threat mapping and security architecture of even the most boring customer success systems to ensure you're not doing something crazy like storing Cloudflare's credentials in plain text.
Got it.
So if you take nothing else away, I think realizing that by asking people to upload HAR files, and so they did have in their instructions a note in red, in bold, that said, sanitize your credentials from your HAR files before uploading them. People were not doing that. Nobody was doing that. And as I found through my own testing, it's really hard to do that. So I understand why people aren't doing that. They're working with support. They're just trying to get problems fixed. They don't care. They're just uploading the HAR file with all the credentials in it. So at some point, Okta should have realized, oh crap, they're not following the instructions, and now we're storing everybody's plain text creds. And that should have been and that just didn't happen, right? The attackers figured that out before they did. So kind of a common refrain with breaches is just attackers figuring out that a process is insecure before the folks that put together that process figured that out. So yeah, that is lesson 1 on my blog post here, protect your session tokens. And so we've I think talked through most of that. So one of the recommendations I give here is post MFA, we have these OAuth tokens and things like that. That probably shouldn't be your only line of defense. It shouldn't be as easy as just copying a cookie. Earlier interview, we were talking about info stealers that basically just steal all your browser cookies and your logged in sessions. Like we need something a bit more there than it shouldn't be as simple as moving a cookie from your laptop to my laptop and that gets me logged in, right? So I think we got to move past that at some point. I know it's there for convenience, but for enterprise processes, maybe something additional there, like a certificate on the laptop at least. That makes it a bit harder for me to just steal a cookie and log in as you. And then the other recommendations are just around handling HAR files. So HAR file is just a saved web session. In this case, since Okta is an authentication provider, they were saved web sessions with login info in them. So that's that. And then lesson number 2, I think one of the interesting things here is if you read the write-ups from 1Password, Beyond Trust, and Cloudflare here, they all did a really good job at detecting this, like within minutes. I think they all might have detected this in an hour or less, which was really, really impressive. And they figured it out mostly through unusual behavior, not by looking for malware or anything like that. It was weird behavior. In some cases, employees reported it. In other cases, it was discovered by SOCs, by people whose job it is to detect threats. So just the way it's supposed to work. So that kind of gave me a little bit of hope. Sorry,
Adrian,
Tyler, you were trying to say something.
Since you're much more intimate on the specific details of that unusual behavior, was it like, I'm going to call it obnoxiously loud unusual behavior, meaning like somebody went in and changed the admin password or something, right? Or, something fundamentally that would trigger alarms? Yeah. Or was it, weird little login date changes? Last login was yesterday and we haven't done it since a week. Or, what I'm getting at is, could this have been a slow and low attack had the attackers been more stealthy about it?
Yeah, so Beyond Trust didn't give a lot of details beyond the fact that they used their own product to discover it, and they, very, chest out on that one. And 1Password, a 1Password employee received an email saying that they generated an Okta report on administrative accounts, and they're like, "Wait a minute, I didn't ask for a report," and that's how they discovered it. And then Cloudflare, I don't think provided many details on how they discovered it, but yeah, like creating new admin accounts, looking for new admin accounts. It wasn't super sneaky stuff. It was stuff where the attacker probably should have known, okay, this is going to generate something that somebody's going to be able to see.
Got it.
So yeah, I mean, that really supports a lot of the work we do in building SOCs and things like that and detective controls. And I think it reinforces yet again something we talked about in the first segment about instead of looking for malware, look for attackers, right? Like attackers have to do some very specific things that they can't hide. They have to steal credentials. They have to use those credentials. In some cases, they're going to create admin accounts from hosts that shouldn't be able to create admin accounts. These things are there. You can detect them. And the fact that these 3 security companies did is proof that this approach can work.
Basic system admin.
Yeah. So lesson 3 is SaaS vendors are common targets. If your name is Okta and the world uses you to log into things, guess what? you are the low hanging fruit to get access to other maybe more difficult targets. So expect the attacks.
It's true, and it's like when people hate on Microsoft because, oh my God, all of these attacks, and it's like, well, yeah, if your target was that big, everybody would come after you too, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where Okta is. It's in a similar realm. Like, you're a target, you're huge. So many companies, So I don't necessarily think that, and that's kind of what I was saying before. I don't think the incident was a slight on Okta, in that any big company is going to be targeted, and some of those attack attempts are going to become breaches. They just are. It's the communication that bothers me.
Yeah, definitely that piece. I think is one of the bigger criticisms, is the fact that you've got 1Password and BeyondTrust calling up Okta saying, hey, I think you got an issue. We're both getting hacked, and it's via our Okta accounts, and we can't find any malicious stuff other than the attacks. And at that point, Okta should be like, yeah, we'll take a closer look. They shouldn't be saying, nah, we checked, it's not us. So yeah, that's an incident response lesson learned there. Yeah. And so also here, it's not just, I'm not just saying Okta should know that they have a target painted on their back. Of course they know that. But I'm also saying customers of Okta should know that Okta has a target painted on their back. And you should have some kind of plan for, if you're third party, if your authentication provider, especially your identity provider, gets hacked, what's the plan there? Do you have enough logs to determine if it's something on your side or something on their side? I think, like most breaches, this one is a great example to use for your tabletops or your, simulated incident response sessions. Lesson 4 here is that zero trust principles seem to work pretty well. That was another pattern we saw in the write-ups from 1Password, Cloudflare, and BeyondTrust, is that they were able to limit the extent of the attack, and all of them say that the attackers were not able to get anywhere near customer workloads or customer data. And on top of that, being able to detect it pretty quick really tells I'm sorry, Tyler, it tells the zero trust story pretty well.
I was just going to say the same thing. Tyler's cringing on the other side of the camera, but it is what it is.
No, stop. You guys paint me out to be some anti-ZT zealot. I love it in theory. I love the framework and principles. I just don't like it when people use it as a product.
Yeah.
But you can say that about any term, right? If the analyst and the vendor communities let it get out of hand, it can be literally anything. And that's what happened with zero trust. It is 100% viable. You don't hate zero trust. You hate the marketing around zero trust.
Yes, I hate when people use the term to say we're a zero trust product, because it doesn't mean anything.
So the final lesson that I wrote up here is that MFA isn't a binary control. It's not an on-off. There's good MFA. There's less good MFA. Maybe all MFA is better than none. But in some cases, even if you have MFA enabled, we learned from this breach, you may only have it for certain types of logins. So one of the things that was noted here, I think it was BeyondTrust, noted that the attacker tried to log in via web interface, and MFA controls prevented them from doing that. Then the attacker just went to authenticate via API, and the API didn't ask for MFA. So they were able to just log in with username and password using Okta's API, and that bypassed the MFA interface.
That's a whole other problem, right? The fact that your APIs don't match your authentication authorization controls for the actual app itself, that's a whole other configuration state problem that should have been caught with some kind of API security platform.
Yeah. Like I imagine, it's physical analogy being like having armed guards at a gate, and a highly secure gate, and then like half a mile down the road, there's a a door in the fence with a master lock, right? I still wouldn't sneak in because armed guards, but still. I would not do that pen test. No armed guards. Yeah, so that's again, that's kind of threat mapping. That's one of the things you learn going through these tabletops, maybe having red team, purple team, pen test. Like somebody should discover, hey, the MFA works great when people are logging in on the web interface, but guess what? Your API doesn't require it. Because an API is intended to be used in an automated manner in many cases. So you can't put traditional MFA on it, but we are starting to see technologies where non-human accounts can have some form of multi-factor authentication. And it's usually going to be something that they already know or have, like a certificate, right? Some kind of public-private key used to authorize the identity. The same way that web browsers exchange keys, right? So, yeah, again, if you do end up in this situation, put extra monitoring in place to make sure that, non-human identities, you have the benefit of those making patterns. They don't look like humans. Typically, if I connect my product to your product over the API, it's going to reach out once every 60 minutes exactly, or once a day at the same time every single day. It's not going to vary that much, right? It's going to look like an automated process. Whereas when an attacker uses it to come in, your behavior is going to look a whole lot different. So there are opportunities there to set up monitoring that will let you know. The other note here on lesson 5, Cloudflare said they got their money's worth out of hard security keys like YubiKeys. So that form of multi-factor authentication stopped this attack for them. No opportunity to do like push auths or something like that. Like in the Uber case, we saw that they just annoyed the person, and the 17th time in that Uber breach, they said fine and hit yes. It's not going to happen with a physical security key, as much as I hate them, because I don't want to have to carry them. All right, and that's those are all the lessons I had from this. I urge people to go read about it. For each of these lessons, I was kind of reading from a blog post I put together here that you can find on valentsecurity.com. If you look at the blogs there, it was posted on November 1st. So it should be pretty easy to find. It's also in the show notes. And for each of these lessons, I listed 3 or 4 recommendations. So the only thing that's not in there that I kind of wish I put in there is a bit more detail on how sanitizing HAR files is difficult. And I don't think the average employee is going to be able to do it. Literally, I think you'd have to be a developer of the web app to successfully sanitize HAR files, or at least be intimate, very intimate with the web app that you've created a HAR file of.
So Adrian, quick question on that. If there was an enterprising young developer or hacker out there who wanted to make an automated tool to do that, do you think there would it be possible?
I think it should be possible. OAuth keys should have a pattern to them. You're not guaranteed it's going to be an OAuth key. I think if you have a combination of the HAR file and the website it came from, I think it would be a little bit easier to automate, because then you could actually go to the website and see what the variable name is, for username, password. You kind of have to successfully log in. I don't know. I think it should be possible, and I want to say, so the tools for sanitizing HAR files that everybody shared after this happened do not do that. They rely on you knowing what the variable name is or the name of the cookie is that you need to delete out of that HAR file, and then you resave the HAR file. So basically, it's not much more useful than manually editing this text file. But I want to say the other day I did see something that said it automatically finds these and tries to delete them. You could probably do it with AI. You could probably do it with ChatGPT, but then again, you're sending ChatGPT plain text credentials.
Challenge accepted.
Which you don't want to do. You probably don't want to send OpenAI your clear text creds.
I'm betting that there are people out there who are doing that.
So 2 seconds of quick Google searching has led me to dark reading, GitHub, Atlassian Marketplace. You name it, there's a bunch from Cloudflare blog introducing the harsh sanitizer. There is a bunch of them out there. It's just finding the right one that's going to work for you and finding if it's going to be easier if you have to have a PhD in computer science to actually use it.
Right. And most of those, like the Cloudflare one, I tried that one and it just parses the file for you. So it makes it easier than going through the raw text. It says, here's all the variables and the names of the variables. And you're like, I don't know what CT underscore is. Like, is that a secret? I don't know. So, that's something, I should really maybe update the blog post or do a separate post on how to do that. So, yeah, maybe I'll do more research on making HAR files easier to sanitize. But honestly, I think it would be better if the company asking you to upload it, had that piece as well, or help.
Well,
help
what you could do too, Adrian, is if you're a company asking to upload HAR files, you should have a cleanser on your side that works for your site by default.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I agree.
Every HAR file that comes in automatically gets run through the cleanser before it's saved.
Right. Ideally, like you shouldn't even be depending on that because that still means that you're transmitting that clear text credential and it's only getting cleaned up when it lands on the other side. I think most companies would want to clean it before even sending it, but that's true. Certainly better than nothing and would have saved a lot of pain in this case on Okta's part. All right, I think that's good for this segment. I think we've covered all the important things. Urge you to go read about it yourself, test your own company, see how you would do if your Okta credentials were compromised. Make sure you have a plan, or if you use one login, whoever you use. So go read up on this, check it out, share it with your team, and put in defenses against it. All right, so we'll be back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news, so stick around.
Adrian, if you can hear me, FYI, I have a hard.
The Security Weekly News is live on Tuesdays and Fridays at 12 o'clock Eastern Time most every week. I try to scan and produce a quick look at some major stories to help you keep up with what's going on in and around the industry in a short format. Myself, Jason Wood, and other guest commentators provide greater insight every week. I'm Doug White, and I hope that you will look for the Security Weekly News in all of your favorite podcast catchers and subscribe for the latest content.
Security Weekly. Love Dr. Doug's hair there. That's great hair.
Mm-hmm.
And now for the Enterprise Security Weekly News, we do have Mr. Tyler Shields joining us. Hello, Tyler.
What up? What up? Let's take a moment here and talk about your awesome hair too. I love your hair because I'm insanely jealous of it.
Thank you.
For those that can't see, he was giving me flirty eyes.
Next week on Enterprise Security Weekly, Adrian talks about his favorite hair products.
Yes, sir. I could use them too.
I don't really have any. Yeah, I will just do. And that just infuriates people even more when I tell them that. I'm just like, yeah, whatever's in the hotel, that's what I use.
No,
like, go to hell.
Hotel shampoo.
Yeah, it's just good genes is kind of the secret, right? Like, I'm sorry, but I don't have to do a whole lot to it. All right, here. Let's see. So the first one, I was a little confused when I saw this pop up. Vulcan Cyber closes $55 million Series B with additional $34 million to solidify position as leader in cyber risk management. So I remember Vulcan Cyber as competing in the same space as Kenna Security, which was acquired by Cisco a while ago, 2018, 2019. Like, it's been a while.
Yep.
And they kind of pivoted a bit, like they were trying to automate patching, and they would auto-generate scripts that would patch things for you. You know, I wasn't aware that this was something that people needed. And I've used the product. I've actually spent some time in the product. You know, good product, really focused on vulnerability management prioritization, which I can see calling that cyber risk management. But what I don't get are the funding rounds here. Do you have any theory on what might have happened here, Tyler? Because they had a Series B, which this is what they're referencing, back in 2021, March of 2021. And now they're saying they're just now closing that Series B with another $34 million today.
Yeah, that's interesting, Adrian. Is it a Series B extension, maybe? Meaning it's literally at the exact same prices and valuations as the previous round, and thus they're calling it a Series B extension?
But they
because they do make note in the release that the recent round of funding justifies the previous unicorn valuation. So it's a little confusing. The language is a little confusing.
They are in a Forrester Wave, though.
They are. And as far as I know, they're a good company. Yeah. But the language is
that's confusing. It's exactly what it is, Adrian. So on March 17th, 2021, according to Crunchbase, they took in $21 million, led by Dawn Capital as a Series B. And now they've taken an additional $34 million in a Series B extension, which is basically saying we are now, quote, closing the Series B, which means it was closed before. They took the money in, and then they reopened it with the same term, same round, and said, hey, we're going to extend the Series B. It just happens to be 2 years later. So this is just a flat round is what it looks like to me.
Gotcha. It's interesting, the categories they say they're in, ASM, for one, application security posture management, risk-based vulnerability management, which is the one I'm familiar with. That's the prior, we pull in all your Qualys, Tenable, Rapid7, and make sense of it and prioritize it for you. And then exposure and risk analytics. The CASM piece and the application security posture management piece, I am less familiar with. I'm not even sure. I haven't dived into application security posture management yet. I'm not even sure what that means.
So I can give you a tip. I can give you information on both. CASM is an area that both Katie and I are intimately familiar with.
Yep.
Her current employer, my former employer, are CASM vendors.
Yeah.
I don't know. I presume your current employer actually positions that way still. Katie, I haven't been in my previous employer for almost a year now, but that's about collecting information about all the assets in your entire digital assets, cyber assets in your environment. In which case, it might make sense to enrich vulnerabilities and have vulnerabilities connected to your asset information, right? So I think it's a natural 1-2 punch to connect our BVM and CASM markets, which many CASM vendors are starting to do, including who are some of the smaller ones, Nucleus and some of the up and coming vulnerability management style vendors are starting to say, hey, we just collect information about your entire universe, and then we overlay the vulnerability data to enrich those assets. To complete the story, before I pass it back to you, Adrian, is the ASPM space, which is application security posture management. That is essentially taking a look at all of your applications, and again, by collecting all the asset information, allowing you to connect what typically is today in a modern application disparate assets, right? You might have a data store here, a function as a service over there, allows you to connect those logically into applications and then look for the configuration state of that entire universe of assets and configure and kind of do what Wiz does for cloud, ASPM will do for your application configuration states. ASPM is super young. I don't think it necessarily sticks around as an isolated market long. I think it gets absorbed into something else pretty quickly, but that's kind of the history of both those markets.
And those are your own internally developed applications?
Yes. Yep. Not SaaS.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. So that's how you.
Katie, anything you want to add there? Katie, since you play in these spaces?
No. I think the problem more than anything with these terms is, well, let's just go back to zero trust. They're getting mushy. They're getting messy because CASM started as a thing, and then the CASM vendors, my company included, started adding to what that meant because there needs to be an evolution of a product. There's nothing wrong with that. You need to evolve a product. It can't just do one little thing, because as you beta test it, and then as you get real customers, and then as those real customers ask for more use cases, you have to build out that product. And as that product, more features, more functionality is built into it, it starts touching other spaces. And as it starts touching other spaces, people look for ways to describe it. And the ways they look to describe it, if there's a category and they can use that and sort of mold it, they will. And this is the problem. And I actually just wrote an article on why this is super problematic, mostly for buyers. But it happens in almost every space, right? Because if you start this small, you're talking about a feature. And companies, if you're a good company, you don't want to build a feature. You want to build a product, and then you want to build a platform, maybe in quotes or not. But it happens, and then people need a way to describe it. And so instead of creating a new category, sometimes they just get all of these different words together, and then nobody really understands it. So it's trying to solve a problem, but what it actually ends up doing is making it a little more confusing for everybody.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's tough to do with a category that's changing rapidly. Trying to define it and give it a term, like the acronym or term has to kind of evolve with it, because it's not going to stand still. All right, I'm going to run through these others real quick here, and we can go back to any that are interesting. But the number 2 there, the 6.4 million seed funding is for TestifySec, which I'm trying to remember what they do. software supply chain security platform. And then Mirror Securities, also software supply chain security platform. And then Risk Ledger, third-party supply chain security platform. So we have a bit of a theme here today.
Yeah, and the kicker is when you're talking about third-party software supply chain, it's very ill-defined. Really, what does it mean? Like software composition analysis was the core of software security supply chain technologies, but what are you doing beyond that? And I still am not convinced that software security supply chain or software supply chain security is anything. Is there's just no meat on that bone for me yet. I'm still trying to wait for a good definition of what that really means.
Yeah. And then there's Tidal Cyber is in here. It's described as threat-informed defense. And it's interesting now, there was a report we talked about last week. It was a Scientia report that talked about how little of the MITRE ATT&CK framework ever actually shows up in attacks. And so now when I see somebody's press release talking about how they embed MITRE ATT&CK, it sounds a lot less impressive to me now that I know that it's basically like a top 10, top 15, and the rest of it's just you're wasting time if you're running after it. I mean, it's good that it stands out.
You know what stands out to me about these funding rounds this week? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, 8 of them.
All small, all seed?
Is that there's 8 of them. That's what stands out to me this week. I'm pleasantly surprised with the number of funding rounds announced this
late
week.
In the year?
Yeah. Well, this late in the year, but simultaneously, I'm getting 3 or 4 this week of, we're a pre-seed or seed round $5 million raised company that's dead or dying or laying off 3/4 of our staff. So I'm seeing the flip side of this from an investor angle, in that I'm seeing companies hitting that toilet bowl with the frequency that's way too high. It's certainly getting me quite worried. And simultaneously, I'm seeing a new record number of seed level investments. So, it's interesting. I don't know if the ones that took in that seed round of 5-6 million 18 months ago or 6 months ago or 12 months ago or whatever it is, timeline wise, are just up against it now and haven't done enough traction in the down market. But simultaneously, investors are going, well, I'm not going to put it there. They didn't grow fast enough, but I still got to put it to work. So I'm going to go one step earlier and start and just place a new bet and see if I can catch the next wave. It's almost like, surfers that paddled out in the ocean. They started to paddle on a wave and went, nah, that one's not going to materialize. And then they went back and they're hitting the second wave that's right behind it.
But I mean, that's where from an investor standpoint, that's where you want to fail, right? Like you're talking about companies that are 5 million funding and under going under, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. 5 to 20. The interesting thing is it depends on the investor, right? If you're sitting on billions, you can't even touch a $5 million investment. It's just too dang small, right? But if you're sitting on 200 million, 300 million, you're doing $5 million checks, $3 million checks, that could be perfect. And then you got the micro investors that are raising 20, 30 million and writing $500,000 checks that are just getting decimated because they're not, these small companies are not getting picked up for the A rounds.
Yeah.
So it just depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah, so sounds like potentially companies we haven't even discovered yet or talked about yet, are going away, which goes to your point you've made, I think, throughout last year and this year that, my perspective was that security companies don't die as often as companies in other startups in other fields, but your point's always been, maybe you're just not seeing it.
I think they die just as much. Yeah, I think they die just as much, but I think many times they die silently in the woods alone. And you never come across the carcass.
There's a, if a tree falls joke there somewhere.
There is,
I'm not
for sure.
I'm too far into this podcast to find it.
And it's sad, right? I mean, when you're really thinking about it, there's 5, 10, 15, 20 people sometimes at these companies that, they're just like, yep, and we're done. Tomorrow we're folding up shop. See you later. And, I'm in a cyber marketers Slack. It's pretty much all the big cyber marketers that you can imagine. And it seems to be every week there's 2, 3, 4 rounds of layoffs at small to mid-sized cyber startups right now. More layoffs coming, and then occasionally you even hear of the death of the company, right? So I think we're in a tough spot right now for a lot, and I am. That's what makes me surprised by 8 funding rounds this week. Is like, wow, okay, maybe we're bouncing off the bottom of the barrel. Maybe, hoping, fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Talking about trends of ones that we might see dying off in a similar way a year from now. HydroX AI and Protecto are both companies built around securing the use of AI, specifically LLMs. And Protecto's India-based. HydroX AI is US-based. Not sure how I feel about that brand. That's going to make it tough to pivot without changing your name. But a couple seed rounds there, and then the last one I think I had here, Cavelo, is a Canadian-based company that also says they're doing Chasm. So that was an interesting one. It seems kind of late to market to be just now raising seed and doing Chasm.
Yeah, definitely a little bit late to market, right, Katie?
We just heard them come up recently. It's not super surprising, right? You've got a space that's getting a lot of attention. They're going to be chasing a lot of companies, including a lot of companies who didn't start in Chasm, who are now vying for Chasm because it's a legit space. But hey.
I would hope they're using the benefit of hindsight to maybe cover some spots that weren't clear to the folks who were early on this market. Yeah, I mean that's basically your big advantage being late to market, is knowing stuff the other guys didn't.
Right.
And hoping they're sinking money into stuff that doesn't have value to customers, and you can avoid that mistake.
I had somebody comment to me specifically about this company. Well, they're only seed rounds, so they're not viable. And I'm like, oh, it's a lot easier to build when somebody's already spelled out the roadmap for you. So I certainly don't want to be like, oh, no chance, buddy. But they're chasing a market for sure.
Yeah.
I'll roll the dice. Having been out of the market for almost a year, I'm going to say no chance, buddy. And the reason it's no chance isn't because they're too late to the game. Well, it is because they're too late to the game, but not because the current leaders in the current definition of the market are going to win. But I think this market folds into something else eventually, right? Folds into vuln management, folds into one of those players, thus eliminating the existence of this market potentially before these guys get to takeoff velocity.
Well, there is that, yeah. I'll probably be fired for saying this, but I don't see in 5 years the Chasm market as a standalone. I don't. Please don't fire me. I like my job. I like the people I work for, please.
If they get to the point where they can start doing some acquisitions, I mean, it's a great platform to build on, to start pulling other stuff in, right?
Look,
because that's literally
market.
The whole product
market,
is designed around integrating other things, right? You'd think it would acquire companies well.
So the Chasm market is interesting, and I can talk about it. I'm gonna steal this up up from underneath Katie because I don't want her to get in trouble with her employer. But I can talk about it publicly because I've been out of the space for a year. The Chasm market is interesting in the sense that it gives visibility into a lot of stuff, but in isolation, Chasm doesn't protect anything. Right? It gives you visibility, observability, change management, and a lot of other value props that are not necessarily protection value props, and not directly necessarily, although it can be used this way, vulnerability discovery value props, although it can do some of that. And so what ends up happening is it becomes a central hub, which could be extremely valuable for other systems and allowing you to programmatically do queries against the environment and find things that you don't know about. But in an era of down market, in an era of, hey, I need less tools, not more, in an era of not wanting to spend in down public markets, This isn't the first thing you buy. Chasm's not the first thing you buy. And so it's a more difficult market to continue to grow right now. As much as I would love to see all the players in this market succeed, because I love
nice
the
to
space.
have.
I think it's brilliant.
It is what I'm hearing.
It's not a mandatory buy. That's correct.
Yeah. And Run Zero is also firmly in this market as well now. They started out with their own proprietary scanner that was really good, and just immediately started adding all these integrations and stuff because they'd already built the database, the home for it, right? So why not start pulling in other data? And they're aggressively, I think, catching up with Jupiter One and Exonius.
And I think the reason why this market doesn't exist is it'll get folded into like Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable could all buy the space if they haven't already built it themselves. Although many of them may have even built it themselves, they could buy in the space. If you think about the future of security in general, it's large-scale data collection with AI overlays. That's what this market does by default. Exonius, Jupiter One, they have massive, massive data sets on their customers, which gives them huge potential. So from an acquisition standpoint, Palo Alto, Cisco, I could go on and on. Microsoft could all make plays to acquire into this space and use this as a central repository of cybersecurity events and management, et cetera, giving them a great platform to build on top of. Anyways, there's a lot of different potential exit opportunities for this space. I would love to see consolidation happen in the next 2 to 3 years here.
Yeah, for sure. So acquisitions, we've got 2 that I thought were interesting. The first is Chris Krebs Stamos Group LLC got acquired by SentinelOne. They're calling it Pinnacle One. They're creating basically an advisory group of just these 2 guys within their services component, which is interesting.
They had a small team, I believe. They had a small team of actual consultants. I'm not sure how big it was. But it's an acqui-hire.
It's not just the 2 of them? Okay.
No, it's not just the 2 of them. That's just the brand. They had a small team there. It's essentially an acqui-hire of an amazing brand. The history, I don't know Chris Krebs that well. I'm actually friends with Alex Stamos. He and I worked together 20 years ago, and he's had a very storied career, having been CISO of Facebook, CISO of Yahoo, CISO of like a bunch of different places. Like, he's been around the block and knows what he's doing. Started his own consulting company. He's also was, or currently is, don't hold me to this, I think was a professor, adjunct professor at Stanford. Like, he's a very, very smart guy. And this was just an acqui-hire of expertise into, expertise and brand, right? They come with that brand too. So it's a brand and expertise acqui-hire to stand up within the buying companies to stand up a services component.
He's also sometimes guest co-host on Risky Business, but we are not.
Oh, is he really?
Alex Stamos is a guest co-host.
Yeah, wasn't he the one that did that spicy pepper challenge recently? And wasabi was the hottest thing that he could tolerate.
No, that was Caleb Simon.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Caleb Simon. Yep.
Different OG. Not definitely as smart, brilliant guy as well, but a different, very big brand name CISO did that one.
It's funny. I forgot about that. All right, the other acquisition here is a product I haven't thought about since I needed a Perl runtime on a Windows machine, ActiveState. I think the only reason I know who ActiveState is if you needed to run Perl on Windows, and we're talking 20 years ago in my career, you would go download ActiveState Perl runtime, and made it super easy to get Perl on your system. But yeah, they got acquired by a PE firm, it looks like. And they're calling it a secure open source integration platform company now. Hey,
Adrian, only boomers use Perl. Everybody else uses not even Python anymore.
No, Python's still pretty actively used. In fact, we just talked about some new Python malware earlier. There's now an info.
I get ripped on for writing code in Python, let alone Perl.
Really?
Like, Perl is for the OG graybeards.
What are you supposed to be writing in? Go, Rust? Are those the cool ones?
I don't know. Let's ask all the kids in Discord. What's the hot new language that everybody actually writes their scripts in?
I hope it's those
Python.
Are compiled languages, aren't they? I don't know.
Hey, at least I'm still semi-relevant if it's Python. So let's make sure it's Python, guys. I'm pro Python.
All right.
I think everybody's pro Python right now, but
Microsoft announced something that was already pretty well known, that they were bringing in generative AI powered security tools. Kind of goes to your point, Tyler, of taking these big data lakes. It seems like that's the goal of, they're calling it Security Copilot. And actually, our company is the only SaaS security company that's partnering with them at launch on this. And it's still like a private launch. They're not quite ready for a public general availability yet. But yeah, a lot of potential promise here.
Yeah, Microsoft's going to be a big player in the, I don't know what it's going to be called. I keep calling it the one ring to rule them approach to cyber. I think they stand to be one of the bigger players that could compete there. Palo can compete there, as I've mentioned before, with their numerous sets of data. The easy way to understand who's going to win in this space is not their AI capabilities, because everybody will advance their AI capabilities in a relatively similar time frame. What really matters is what data you have. Who's got the most data? Right. Who's got the richest and broadest and deepest data set that you can ask questions of? I was at the Forrester Security and Risk Summit this week, and I saw a keynote by George Colony, the founder of Forrester. He's been around as an analyst since the birth of analysts, right? He covered, I think, the release of like Windows 95 or something as an analyst, right? That's how long he's been an analyst. And during his keynote, he said, really, what is the future look like? It's compiling massive sets of data and using English language questions to ask any question of the data set and getting back accurate answers. That's AI fundamentally. So what do you need to be successful there? The biggest pile of data to be able to ask the questions of. The routines of how to ask the questions will evolve continuously. But whoever who owns the data owns the oil.
And it's interesting because one of the trends we're seeing is, instead of pulling all your data and putting it into one place, we're seeing more and more tools that can pull that data just in time, that actually link to that data. So you don't have to incur the costs of moving it around every single time there's like a better data lake or something like that.
Yeah. The problem with that, though, is that I'm not sure the current AI algorithms work well with data sets that are JIT, that are just-in-time data sets, because the algorithms aren't designed that way. Because if you're doing just-in-time, you don't have global broad asset like a brain might over a set of data. You have to pull in pieces as necessary.
Yeah.
And this is where my AI depth will depart, and where I would go to like a Daniel Miesler and say, hey, buddy, does this just-in-time approach actually work? If it does, I agree with you 100%. If it doesn't, then you're going to have to, whoever owns the data wins the war.
So maybe it's that the training happens before the just-in-time question asking process. So maybe those are two separate processes. But again, definitely not an expert in this area also. So I'd have to go ask around.
Yeah, but I think you're making my point, Adrian, in the sense that what you just talked about is the ML or AI algorithm itself and how it works. That's going to be equivalent. Like Microsoft figures it out, or OpenAI figures it out, or Google figures it out. Within a very short time frame, the others will be using the same approaches and techniques. So again, who wins? Whoever already has the data, either programmatically, already stored in a data lake, just in time. Whoever can get at the data will win this war.
Yeah. Well, I think there's three separate pieces here, right? There's the general purpose AI, LLM, right? That's trained on very broad data. It knows how to put together a report. It knows different formats. It knows how to do useful things. And then there's the proprietary data, the data that's proprietary to you, which isn't trained into the LLM, but is used as like a data set that you can now ask this LLM questions on, right? So I don't think you train on it the same way the LLM trains on everything else. But again, I don't know exactly how that works. And then the third part is actually asking the questions, the process of getting answers.
I highly recommend actually reading the Microsoft link on their security blog that we have linked in our show notes, because it talks about how they're rolling it out. Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Defender for External Attack Surface Management, custom plugins, Microsoft Intune with AI, Microsoft Entra with AI, Microsoft Purview with AI, right? Like all of those components and how they're actually going to use AI to make each of them better. It's a really good read.
You imagine the workforce you have to tackle all that crap at the same time? It's incredible. It's a lot.
Well, it's Microsoft. They've got it.
Right. Yeah. $20 billion security vendor.
That's right.
All right. Let's move on here. So that's number 12 is the link Tyler was talking about in our show notes. So look for story number 12. Number 13, SemGrep. Not a whole lot to talk about here, but they now have their own secret scanner. So this has become kind of like a mini attack surface management market, finding secrets where they shouldn't be, or they could be scraped by attackers and things like that. Speaking of Daniel Miessler, number 14 is an essay by him, and he's arguing that AGI doesn't have to be a single product from a single company, but that the first time we see it, it will be kind of a combination of, maybe multiple LLMs or something like that. Something that's stitched together from multiple different sources. So interesting read there. I got a couple links here. Just New York State is going nuts with its cybersecurity strategy. Just released new requirements for financial services companies. And then even more recently, just announced, and we won't get to see the regulations until December 6th, I think, and there's going to be an open comments period. But they're adding new cybersecurity regulations for hospitals throughout New York State, which does not surprise me, because every morning I look at an RSS feed of all the breaches going on, and hospitals are on that list every week. There's new hospital systems that are getting disrupted. They're having to move patients around. It's crazy how often hospitals and healthcare organizations are getting hit with ransomware and other attacks.
Man, these ransomware scenarios are just getting so bad, and we'll talk about a really unique, innovative tactic when we get to the last stories of the day. But man, they're doing everything to squeeze money out of these companies and these hospitals and these institutions. It's so sad.
Yeah, I mean, once they became businesses, they started acting aggressively like, a capitalist business does, right? So now they're doing, they're learning the same tricks from actual businesses and doing some nasty, shady stuff.
Yep.
So before we get to that story, two more to mention here. The Mirai Confessions is is this Andy Greenberg?
That's Andy Greenberg's piece, and it is phenomenal. Andy, for those of you that don't know, Andy Greenberg's a writer for Wired. He also has written for every major high tech. Like, he's one of the best. Yeah, he's one of the best cyber journalists ever, in my opinion. Probably the best. And his writing is riveting. I'm about halfway through reading that article myself right now. It's like reading a wonderful book. But for me, what I really dug about that
one day.
What I really loved about that article so far, halfway through, is the psychological components of these teenagers who figured out how to literally take down the internet. Anytime they wanted, they could break the internet. The descent from very, very brilliant, children, teens, young teens, middle schoolers, the descent down the path of what resulted in, some very dangerous things happening to them. So it's a great read, and I highly recommend you take a look at it.
Yeah, and the TLDR of Mirai back in 2015, 2016, basically these young hackers figured out that there's all these IoT devices on the internet. They all have bandwidth, and they all have default credentials, and they just wrote scripts and automated scooping them up and turning them into a botnet, and wrote malware to actually run on all these Linux-based IoT devices. And it was really incredible. Like, they cross-compiled that malware for every chipset you can imagine. For x86, for PowerPC, for MIPS, for ARM, for several different kinds of ARM. It was crazy. And lots of surveillance cameras scooped up. People's broadband modems got scooped up.
Yep. Self-taught teens is
and so this is a story.
It's insane how smart these kids were.
Yeah. And so this is a story of how and why, I guess. I have not dug into it yet, but the fact that you're enjoying it, Tyler, I'll tackle this probably later today.
Yeah, well, they started by dropping Minecraft servers off and messing with each other's video games. That's where their descent into DDoS madness began. So we'll let you read the rest of the story from there.
Yeah. And so our squirrel story today, our specific ransomware group, what was the name of it? Alf V or Black Cat ransomware group filed an SEC complaint that one of their targets that they hacked didn't report the hack as required by SEC rules. So they got snitched on.
It's not required for a few more days.
Oh, for a few more days?
Yeah.
They made a mistake. They were good in theory. They thought it was like 4 days or something that it had to be reported, and the regulation didn't go into effect for 90 days from the announcement of the regulation, which hasn't quite hit yet. So technically, it's not actually required.
That doesn't make it any less hilarious in my mind.
No, it makes it even more hilarious.
Good in theory, poor in execution, Adrian. That's all.
So a lot of these guys get caught, but I find it interesting, the trend that attackers are more and more willing to speak to journalists and to like talk publicly. You know, like journalists just go ask them, how'd you hack into, what was the casino MGM? And they just gave them details. I don't know how much we can trust those details, but sometimes they make stuff up. They put together old data leaks and claim that they've created a new breach or something like that. That happens all the time. But yeah, it's a weird trend. It's like PR as an attack tool, right?
I mean, I've been in groups over the last 20 years, obviously mostly 20 years ago now, not more recently, but I've been involved with groups that actually had dedicated PR people to the hacking groups. We had people that knew how to do that, and their full-time job was to handle how we represent that group publicly and how the public sees that hacking group, whether it be, better blog posts, stronger blog posts, more thought leadership content, just like any other marketing org, or going to press contacts like Andy Greenberg and pitching a story to them. Look, I can tell you exactly how this went down if you cover it in this way. There was a lot of that over the years back in the Loft and the Cult of the Dead Cow. They had PR dedicated people that worked the angles that way.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. All right. Well, that's all I've got for today. Thanks so much, Katie and Tyler, for joining me today.
Great to see you. Thank you, Adrian.
Been a fun episode. And a big thanks to everyone for watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Next week is Thanksgiving, so we will be running an older one. And we'll see you the week after that.